This week in Arsenal, the Gunners win the North London derby to stay at the top of the table. Edu travels to Saudi Arabia. Jorginho is offered a contract extension, and Gabriel Jesus is for sale. And I got married. Let's get into it.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Welcome in to This Week in Arsenal, episode 54. As always, I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. And the man, the myth, the legend is here with me again, as always, to discuss North London Derby win, the Jorginho contract extension, Edu, this trip to Saudi Arabia, apparently for networking purposes. This news coming out about us being willing to part ways with Gabriel Jesus and a few other things. So of course, with me to do that, as always, is Sash. You can follow on Twitter at LT Arsenal. Sash, how you doing, my friend? How's everything going?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm actually super happy for you because you got married on Saturday and then on Sunday you had that North London derby. So must have been one of the most magical weekends for you. And yeah, I was seeing some of your pictures yesterday that you were so kind to share with me. And yeah, I'm so happy for you. And it's great to be here on this podcast after I think a week. And yeah, looking forward. So let's get this rolling. But Sham, more than me this week, I want to know about you. How are you feeling? And how have the last 5 to 6 days been for you?
Yeah, it's been great. I think the wedding planning process is very stressful. If do all the stuff that people like to do with all that, and get the venue and the caterers, and you're dealing with buying alcohol and getting florists and a photographer and a DJ or a band. A lot of different things to juggle. It's a lot of responsibility, but the when my wife walked down the aisle, I cried like a baby. And it was just I think everyone who's ever gotten married will understand this, and everyone who will get married will come to realize this as well. It's very, very emotionally overwhelming and touching to have your closest friends and family with you in a room celebrating you and the love you have for another person. So yeah, it was absolutely lovely. I will say Sunday morning was very interesting because my wife basically was just like, "You're not going to get like mad if Arsenal don't win today, right?" And I was like, "It's the North London derby, though." so so it was really funny because like we were in the honeymoon suite, and then she went to go kind of touch base with her parents who were staying the floor down, and I'm saying they're watching the game. I'm having the time of my life because we go 1-0 up, and then Spurs score, but it's offside, and then we go 2-0 up, and Havertz plays, the switch of his life, and Saka just jukes his way into putting the ball in the bottom left corner, and then we go 3-0 up. Halftime, I'm living the dream, Sash. I just married the love of my life, and we're beating the hell out of Spurs the following day. Life is great. And then we give away a pretty dumb goal and we go 3-1. That's okay. It's fine. Still 3-1. Very comfortable. Declan Rice gives away a penalty in the, I think it's like I want to say late 70s, early 80s, somewhere around that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so gives away a penalty. Son, of course, puts it away because if there's one thing, Spurs have been able to do pretty consistently for the last several years, it's score penalties between Kane and Son.
In North
Um,
London derbies,
in
especially.
North London derbies, yeah. Um, and then of course, it's just 3-2, and we're going and running some errands because we're having people at our place for like a little post wedding brunch. And I'm just like, just don't fuck this up, Arsenal. We're so close. Don't ruin the weekend. And then I, walked out with a pastry order, and I checked my phone. It was 3-2 final score, and life is great. So we got the 3 points and all that. And yeah, just feeling pretty good right now. So, um, you know, just kind of from a 1,000-foot view, how do you feel after all of that, right? The going 3-0 up, and Spurs kind of, I don't want to say dominating the match. I don't think that's an accurate description, but they had more of the ball. They definitely were, they had us under the cosh at the final portion of the match. Almost came back. Seemed desperate to do it. There was Charlison situation as well. Just what's your general takeaway from all that?
So, firstly, I was expecting Spurs to actually create some chances against us, not because they're a great side or something, but because we played so many games in recent days. So, Spurs have actually been rested, I think, for like 2 weeks, I think, leading up to the derby. So, they obviously had all the legs with them to play this match, and they were playing in their home. And I put out a tweet before the game saying that this is Spurs' biggest ever game in their history, and at least in the Premier League, not all history, obviously, but in the Premier League era, this is like their biggest game because I don't think there's ever been a game where Spurs have had a title decider and they've gone. So for them, the next best thing that can give them joy is stopping a rival. Like the way Everton stopped Liverpool, Spurs would also have been thinking that, hey, maybe we could stop Arsenal. And look, they were playing at their home. I think they had some advantages before the game started in terms of fitness and all of these things. But Spurs, in typical Spurs fashion, didn't cross the finish line. I think that's the reality. They've always been a team that threatens a bit and then just fade away. We saw even in the Champions League final that they had against Liverpool. They had some chances, but they didn't take it on their biggest night. So for me, I was really confident going into this game because look, people will say Arsenal, they don't deal with pressure so well. Look what happened last season. But I'm telling you, Spurs are much bigger bottlers than us. So when it comes to their big moment, I don't trust them to get the job done. So no surprise for me to see us cross the finish line. It's also not a surprise for me to see Spurs creating some situations and some chances. I think it was expected. I think even in the first half, Spurs did have some chances, and maybe you could say that 3-0 flattered us a little bit. But at the end of the day, the game is about putting the ball in the back of the net. I think there have been many games this season where Arsenal have actually done enough probably to win the game or at least draw the game, but ended up, losing the game or dropping points in a game they should have won. So I think this was a game that slightly evened it all out. But I would still say that over the course of the 90 minutes, that Arsenal deserved to win. This is not to suggest that after 85 minutes I was super calm and composed, because obviously Spurs at 3-2, anything can happen. It just takes one moment. Um, and yeah, so I'm looking forward now to the coming games. Thank you, my friend. You're a legend. Thank you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the upcoming games now to see if Arsenal can actually cross the finish line. So let's see what happens. Let's see if we can get things done. But I think from the point of view of this first game, I was happy with how we played. We took our chances. And yeah, I think a lot of fans can relate to this comment as well, that in the last 10 minutes, they aged 50 years. I think that's relatable. I think this is part of the stress. I was just telling Sham before the podcast that, we can't always have it like smooth riding with Arsenal. There's always some bump, always some stress. But at the end of the 90 minutes, that's what makes the celebration also that much bigger. It was relief that, we still stayed in it. So all in all, pleased with how we played in the game. I think at the end of the day, now it's about results. I could not care less about performances at this stage. Get the result. I think the only thing, if I'm clutching at straws, that people might say is that, look, maybe we should not have conceded like the goal that we did. That Raya mistake was not a good one. And I just hope that, yeah, in the final game week, it doesn't come down to goal difference and we will look at this game and be like, shit, maybe we could have managed it a bit better. But still, Spurs away winning is a big deal. North London derby, form goes out of the window, everything goes out of the window. So for us to go there and get the result over the line was huge. And now let's carry forward this momentum into the coming games also.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, we have just under 1,000 of you watching and listening currently. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here with us. Please do follow the pod at This Week Arsenal. Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, to your last point there, it was really frustrating seeing us make things more uncomfortable for ourselves, right? Kind of take a 3-0 lead and turn it into just is it Naitov or Nerov said there. I noticed some extra gray hairs in my beard this morning. It was a really stressful last few minutes, and I wasn't even able to watch really until later. But yeah, I think that's why you try to score as many goals as possible, because things like this can happen, right? B, I'm not super upset about it long term, just because it was an error by Raya, and I think that error is kind of caused. If you go back and watch what Romero's doing there, he just decides to charge forward, right? Because they're 3-0 down, and Spurs have several players who are all about looking like they're tough guys, and they're hard men, and they have stamina, and they care, right? Passion merchants, really. So I think Romero just kind of vacated his assignment, and we weren't expecting it. And I think Raya definitely looked like he was caught in two minds when he tried that pass there. And then the Rice penalty was just kind of unfortunate. He swung his leg to clear the ball. Someone got in front of him at the last second. It happens, right? But I was really encouraged, because we are back to scoring from set pieces. I feel like that had kind of dried up for a little while. And B, the way that we were able to close out that game, right? There's that Billy Carpenter graphic going around. Well, not graphic, but he basically, took a photo from the latter stages of the game, us defending the lead. And we're basically playing a 2-8 in defense. I think it was like Havertz and Odegaard up top, and then Saka, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Kivior, Tomiyasu, Party, all just in one line.
We brought the bus, basically.
Yeah, we parked the bus. And it was really funny because, there were a lot of Spurs fans complaining about that afterwards. They're like, oh, how dare Arsenal play such, a low block against us and try to hit us on the counter? Like, they don't deserve to be competing for the title if they're going to play like that. Oh, and also
This is the same club that had Conte, Mourinho, and Nuno Espirito Santo as their last three coaches.
Yep, yeah.
Like who are they to lecture us about
these
that?
are low block and hit them on the counter FC, and they're calling us Stoke because we scored 2 corner goals against them. So it was just really funny, and I think Arteta is challenging kind of this mainstream idea that big clubs have to play in a particular way, right? That big clubs have to always dominate matches, have more of the possession, play attacking football, yada yada, right? And while dominating possession and having more field tilt and controlling those margins of the game on a consistent basis show whether or not a team is top level or not, I also do think that there is kind of an underrated importance to being able to play in different ways, right? So we saw what Spurs were weak at We saw that they love to leave themselves open at the back, play that high line, easy to get in behind, and then B, they're very easy to bully on corners, right? Especially Vicario. And we took advantage of both those things, right? We rope-a-dope them a little bit, hit them on the counter for our second goal, and then the first and the third goal were corner kick goals. So yeah, all in all, I'm really happy that we did what we did. We saw out the result, keeps us in first, puts the pressure on City, and like Dave said there, City have 4 games to screw up. And I was kind of thinking about that the other a couple hours ago, where every match City have is an opportunity for them to screw up. At least that's how I'm trying to think about it. So that it's not all doom and gloom. But yeah, we're doing our job right now, and the goal difference thing, I'm not super worried about. I think we're ahead of them by 7 right now in goal difference.
I thought it got reduced because City won like 2-0, probably.
Oh yeah, I forgot they
can
played
check.
for us right after.
Yeah, right, though. You're right. The goal difference is 7, but yeah, they have
plus
game
50
in
and we have
hand.
plus 57, right?
Yeah, but they have a game in hand, and I just think it takes a 5-0 from them
Yeah.
to bring it back. But yeah, also there's also a chance that if they slip, that would be interesting. That'll be really interesting.
Yeah. And if we just win our 3 games, then I'm not super concerned about the goal difference. And I think City are playing some teams that Spurs of course are just Spurs fans want their team to just bend over for City, but West Ham and Fulham I think are teams that you don't often see those big results against. So we'll see what happens. But I think if we just win our games by as many goals as we can, which considering it's Bournemouth, Everton, United left, I think we can rack up some goals there. We'll just see what happens. We're doing what we can do at this point, and yeah.
It'll be hilarious if Spurs like beat City and Arsenal win the league because of that. That would be the most amazing finish to the season.
I'm gonna be the biggest Spurs supporter. Take on
What do you
CB
think is going
Spurs.
to happen, City versus Spurs?
I think City are gonna smack them silly. Is what's gonna happen. I think I'm gonna be the biggest Spurs supporter on that day, but I think what's going to happen is Spurs are going to go at them gung ho, and City are going to stifle them for the most part. I think Spurs will grab 1 or 2 goals, but I think City, for the most part, are going to handle it and then just take them out on the counter. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 4-1 for City. That feels like something that would happen.
I think this guy Nitin who asked the question, he's my friend. He's a big City fan. I think he will be very happy with what you've just said. But I just hope on that day Spurs have something to play for. Because if it was just a normal game, Spurs versus City, City don't have a good record at that ground for whatever reason. Somehow all of their luck goes away when they go away to Spurs. Like in recent seasons, if you look at it. Like even when Spurs were shit under Mourinho, they still beat City at home. So I don't know if this year they're going to play so bad that's like I like it's also hard to tell your team to go out there and lose. Like I'm sure Postecoglou is not going to be like, guys, take it easy today, because that'll be the worst message to send as a coach. So yeah, I don't know, to be honest. If Spurs have something to play for, and if they have a bit of shame and they want to try to make UCL football, maybe then they could spring a surprise against City. I do think City will drop points in one match, but I think what the most Arsenal thing would be City dropping points to Spurs and Arsenal dropping points not to United, not to Bournemouth, but to Everton on the final day to finish all of us for good. So, well, that's just me catastrophizing, but still,
I would disappear for a month if we did that. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we're talking about a Villa managed by Unai Emery, who I think has done an excellent job there. To be objective, but Emery does seem to be allergic to, if not finishing in the Champions League, making it out of the group stage there. So I hope his typical anti CL behavior comes into effect here, and we'll see. But on the Spurs point, there's no way Postecoglou is going to say, "Yeah, guys, just don't care." Just get out there and lose the game, because as much as Spurs fans want that to be the case, I we're talking about some of the most competitive people on earth here, right? These guys do not like losing games, and B, if you're trying to compete for the Champions League, right? They're in it until they're not. And if you're trying to compete for the Champions League and your manager is telling you, "Yeah, throw this game because it'll be tough or it'll be annoying for the team down the street from us," like, a lot of players are going to think to themselves, "Is this what I signed up for?" You know. So yeah, we'll see. I don't like it being out of our hands, but that's kind of the situation that we've put ourselves in, unfortunately. But there is one element of the derby that has kind of been a big talking point in the media, and that is how Ben White messed with Vicario on both of our corner kick goals. Yeah, grabbing at his glove strap there. So that he did that on our first goal, which Højbjerg headed right past Vicario, and then the second corner kick goal, the Havertz one that we scored. That one, if you go back and watch the replay, White gets on Vicario and kind of like moves him slightly. Not like he doesn't like grab him or anything, but he backs into him a little bit. And then at the last second, right before everyone goes up to head the ball, Vicario jumps forward, right? So he's not impeding Vicario at the time that he has to make the save. And then Havertz scores. So there was I think Gary Jacob article that came out that's basically kind of asking the question of, what do we do about Ben White on corners? Should we make it illegal? Like, how do referees and coaches stop him? Which I think is immensely silly. And I just want to get your thoughts on this idea that White might be doing something illegal. I've not seen that one.
Insane. Only Chief can come up with something like this. No,
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, so what are your thoughts on this idea that what White's doing is not legal, right, under Premier League rules, and also, what's your take on whether it should be illegal?
Look, at the end of the day, the laws are there, okay? And it's up to the referee to make the best decision. Ben White has been doing this for every single match, more or less. It's not the first time he's doing this. There have also been times where he has crossed the line and fouled the keeper, and the referee ended up blowing the whistle, and yeah, we had to stop play. But I think in football, you will always have contact. It's a contact sport. It's not like players are not allowed to touch each other. It's the extent to which you touch someone that determines if it's a foul or not. And in Ben White's case, I think it was incredibly soft. And these are the same Spurs fans that told us not to cry 2 years ago. I remember when Cedric gives away a penalty for not for just having very minimal contact with Son, I think it was. And Spurs open the scoring in that game and take the lead. And my boy Rob Holding also got penalized for something that I thought was really soft in that game. But back then people were like, "Hey, Arsenal fans are like the problem. They're complaining." You can see here also. The City fan Nitin. He also thinks that Arsenal get all the decisions. But the truth is, my friend, there's one team with 115 charges, which still somehow is allowed to play the sport. So yeah, maybe we will get this title in a few years when City go into League Two or something.
I wish Arsenal was a thing. I wish it was a thing, but it is
Yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah. No, but coming back to it, I think it's too soft, and I think Spurs fans, they're just finding something to cry about. They don't want to admit that we're better than them. Like you could see in December, I was seeing tweets from Spurs fans like, "Look at Ange, he's competing with Arsenal in December. We are on par with them in his first season. He doesn't need a 4-year project." And now that they've dipped, they're like, "No, it takes time. Look at the time that Arteta got." I think the most hilarious end to this Spurs project would be if they stick with Ange for 3 years and they don't come anywhere close to winning a title, which I think is what is looking likely. Like, I don't see them as a huge threat. I do think he's a pretty good coach, in all honesty, but the way Spurs fans hype their team up is insane, to be honest. So, yeah, it's just them complaining. I don't see any harm in what Ben White's done. It's obviously been very well thought through with Nicholas Yeover. It's not like Ben White on his own has decided to go and dance with the opposition keeper. It's more like, yeah, he's there to like put the keeper off, to make the keeper unsighted. And it's not just Ben White who has contact on the keeper. Sometimes the keeper also gives one back to him. So you've seen corner kicks, you've seen defenders and forwards always like jostling with each other. Why can't we do the same with the goalkeeper when it's so minimal? So yeah, Spurs fans, I cannot for the life of me understand why they're so angry about that. And it just seems to me like they're deflecting from, I think, what was, I think, a superior performance from Arsenal and a well-deserved win for us.
Yeah, and it's not just Ben White who's kind of doing this kind of thing where he is manipulating the goalkeeper or a player around him and trying to disrupt him. Right, when White scored his first against Chelsea, if there's that, I think it was Dan Critchlow who tweeted this out, this video where Saliba basically like manhandles Kukurea into a position where he's playing the rest of the Arsenal players on side and then just holds him there. And so the ball falls to White in this pocket of space where he should be offside if Kukurea wasn't there. And then White just is able to just slam it into the net. And I think it was, 3-0 or something. You know, it's I think like you said, this calling for it to be illegal, this asking the refs to get involved here, it's just being a sore loser, right? Because we've seen Brentford basically just hug Leno until the last second and then not let him make a save against us. It happened last season at Villa as well. They did that to Ramsdale. So when it happens to us, I don't really see any complaints about it outside of our fan base. I don't understand why it's a big problem now. It's just trying to find as many advantages as you can on the pitch, right? It's in the spirit of the game where it's not fouling. It's really just clever, savvy play, right? And it's the reason why we, currently are tied or we're one goal away from having the most goals from set pieces in a Premier League season. And over the last 3 seasons, we have scored the most goals from set pieces in the top 5 leagues, right? And that's because we're able and willing to do those sorts of things, and just push the envelope a little bit and be bold and thoughtful with every aspect of the game, right? And I agree in terms of Postecoglou being a really good manager. I think he is. I think he's really talented. I think he's a really likable guy. Um, he seems to be able to communicate his ideas well, both to the team and to the outside world, which I think is an underrated part of management. But um, if I'm a Spurs fan, I'm furious with him right now after the North London derby, because how do you look at Vicario, who has been bullied pretty consistently on set pieces this season? How do you look at Vicario, kind of having that issue, and then you see Arsenal, who are, in the lead for most goals from set pieces. You have Ben White messing with people. You have Saliba basically giving players the the mannequin treatment and moving them wherever he wants them to. You have Arsenal doing basically picks, making picks, like Trossard did on a couple pieces. We're doing all this stuff. We're scoring off of set pieces at a pretty consistent rate. How do you see those two things and not think I got to do something about this? I gotta
Exactly.
like that. That's terrible. Like, how do you not put a guy on White and just say keep him away from Vicario? That's the least you have to do, right?
Yeah.
And
the
if you go
media
back,
as well. And the
yeah,
media as well. These same guys were the guys glorifying Stoke City back in the day. Oh, look at them, so physical. They're so hard to play against. But the moment Arsenal, the team that has historically been bullied, the team that's historically had horrific injuries as a result of the opposition being overly physical, we are the ones now getting shouted by the same media for not even doing something physical. It's more like we're just in the face of the opposition mode, which is unbelievable, if you ask me.
yeah, we're not being bullied anymore. And yeah, it's just I don't know. It's really annoying. It's all fun and games until Rory Dunlap is an Arsenal player.
Legend. What a legend.
That is a reference not for the kids. But yeah, it's just annoying. It's just another one of those things where I think when Arsenal are good at something, the party's kind of over, and it is what it is. But moving away from the North London derby, there's been some news this week, especially kind of on the transfer front, on the squad management front. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was the report, I think it came yesterday, that Edu and Jason Ato went to Saudi Arabia. And it was very explicitly reported that they weren't there to talk about sales or purchases of any particular player. They were just there to get to know Saudi League personnel. And I mean, basically, it was networking, right? But I think they're laying the groundwork for potential relationships, right? I think I'll put it to you like this: Edu's biggest issue as sporting director and before that as technical director at Arsenal has been his ability to offload players, right? We're talking about a guy who's terminated a lot of contracts, and while I think most of those were pretty savvy moves, a couple of those came because we couldn't get rid of players, right? And I think this is an attempt to address that. I think this is Edu basically saying, okay, how do I get better about having a reliable buyer or a reliable set of buyers for players that we're trying to move on from, right? So that in the event Juventus can't give us any more than, a packet of crisps and a handshake for one of our players, we can go somewhere else and, kind of leverage that. So I think, and I could be way off base here, but I think that this is an attempt to start building relationships with Saudi teams so that in the future we can start moving on players that we've either evolved past or just can't contribute for us anymore. And that, coupled with the news that actually no, we'll talk about the other things separately. But just what are your thoughts on the trip to Saudi? And do you think I'm crazy for having this thought?
No, not at all, because I think you've thought it through very logically. It's not like you've just jumped to a conclusion. So obviously when they go to Saudi, there must have been an objective associated with that trip, and yeah, people will say networking, but why do people network? Like, there's obviously some ultimate aim you have to even network in the first place, right? It could be many things. I don't think it's like partnerships or something like that. I don't think that's the case. Then why would Edu go? It's like, I don't think partnerships is really something covered in his job description, but I think it's definitely something to do with players. I think it could. I think the conclusion that you have reached is the most logical one. That, yeah, probably some outgoings. There are obviously a list of players who could leave Arsenal in the summer. There's quite a few out there, and One of them we will get onto, but I think that could well be it. Like explore that avenue for sale, because across Europe it's so hard to sell players sometimes. And yeah, as you mentioned, you got teams like Juventus who, and the Serie A teams especially, like the amount of drama that they do to try and sign a player is exhausting. And I sarcastically once said that Edu's greatest strength is that he's really good at terminating contracts and paying release clauses. But if we can sell well to Saudi Arabia, if we could shift some of our players, that will be good. That's in our venue. So yeah, I don't want to speculate too much into that. I know some people are also speculating that maybe he's gone to meet with some of the owners of Newcastle to discuss moves for Alexander Isak and Bruno. I think that's a bit too far fetched. I don't think that's happening right now.
I hadn't even thought of that actually. That's
No, I don't think that's the case. But this is what my friends like Eduardo Han and people like that on Twitter, this is the sort of message that they propagate. But yeah, I don't think that's the case. I think it's more like building that relationship. And I guess it's more like this. So I don't think they're going to be our first point of selling players, but it's more like, yeah, if you can't get rid of your player and sell them anywhere, you need an avenue to eventually like sell them. And I think it could be a partnership where I do like, look, these are the players I have. And when they're leaving, maybe I can let the league know, and the league can notify the teams within that league that so and so player is available, and you can make a move for that player. So I think that's a possibility. And I think the conclusion that you have reached is perfect. But yeah, let's hope that this is good news in terms of outgoings and the money that we can generate. I think all of this ultimately comes back to how can we maximize our budget for what we want to do in the summer. So yeah, let's see. Let's see if this trip is just one of those visit Rwanda sort of tourism trips, or whether it actually has something. I think we will know during the window.
I'll um I'll give you the flip side of this as well, because I just kind of realized I think there could be another side of this, right? Where not only are we looking for a place to sell some players if we need to, but I think recently there's been a bit of an exodus from the Saudi league, right? You've had several players leave and kind of publicly say this isn't what I expected it to be, right? Um, and there have been reports about some of the Saudi teams failing to pay players on time, failing to pay players the amount that was agreed. So I think that will continue in the summer. I think in the summer we're going to see a lot of players um, try to come back to Europe from Saudi, and maybe for the older ones, try to go to the MLS or something like that. And if you look at the list of players who are currently in Saudi, there's some interesting ones, right? There's Otavio, Emerick Laporte, uh, Franck Kessie, Alan Saint Maximin, Jordan Henderson. If you don't want to have a midfield anymore.
Isn't he
Uh,
Ajax?
oh yeah, he did go to Ajax. Never mind. But yeah, Henderson was one of the people I was thinking about when when I'm talking about people who left Saudi, right? Henderson and Benzema, I think, are the two players who really come to mind. Um,
There's Gabby
Edward.
Veiga also. He's a good player.
Did Gabri Vega go to Saudi?
I think he went to Saudi.
Oh, and there's Sergej Milinkovic Savic, who I know we were linked with last summer. He went to El Hilal. There's Ruben Neves. Ruben Neves is probably the big one here, right?
Yeah, Veiga is in Saudi. Yeah, I just checked.
Yeah. So there's quality to be had there, right? So I don't think it's far fetched to imagine, excuse me, a situation in which Ruben Neves or Otavio are trying to leave the Saudi league, and we take a look at that and think to ourselves, well, we could use some quality in our midfield. Why not? Why not try to leverage these newfound relationships that we have and see if we can buy them off that Saudi club, right? I think that is something to think about there. And again, it's always nice to have someone who's willing to take some players off your hands that might want to go to Saudi, right? Thomas Partey was linked with a move there. I think maybe Gabriel was linked with a move there. I'm not
Yeah,
100% sure. Yeah.
he was. Yeah,
Um,
more as
so
agent, but yeah.
yeah, yeah. So maybe for Party, I guess it's more a situation of just please take this guy off our hands, and then maybe Gabriel, it's like please give us 200 million pounds for him. But yeah, I think especially in the summer we might see that happen with Party, who we try to offload and get some money back for, especially considering this next thing where the Athletic reported that we have offered a contract extension to Jorginho. I don't think it's been signed yet. Definitely hasn't been announced yet. But Arsenal want Jorginho to stay, and that kind of tells me, because I doubt we're going through the summer without a midfield acquisition, right? So that kind of tells me that Jorginho is seen as perhaps the more reliable six backup, six
Mm.
depth to Party. I could be wrong, right? But I think those two things together just kind of make me wonder if maybe Party's days at Arsenal are numbered. But I personally think it's a good move. I think Jorginho has been a really useful player at times. I know he's kind of getting up there in terms of years. Well, I mean, he's 31, 32. Um, doesn't seem able to play multiple games a week, definitely not multiple 90s per week. But, when we have been able to call upon him, he's been really good at the back. He's allowed us to move Rice to that left eight position, which I think he's very excellent at, very underrated at. And all in all, he's just a very, talented, experienced, definitely future manager of a player to have in the team. And I think that can only really be a good thing. But,
Yeah.
um, what are your thoughts on the Jorginho, the potential for Jorginho to stay at Arsenal for a few years, and what that might mean for Thomas Partey's future?
Yeah, so I think Jorginho is the more reliable player, I would say, in terms of fitness, as you mentioned. Um, but I think what will happen is we extend Jorginho, and I think we will still keep Thomas Partey for the remainder of his contract because we are not going to get huge money for him. And I think the way the club will view it is like this. So currently, Elneny is like playing the Jenkinson role where he's like the cheerleader of the club and he's just there in the background. But I think next season we could have a scenario where maybe Jorginho, as he obviously is getting older, plays that sort of role where he's there more just to be like a good influence on the dressing room. And then you will have Thomas Partey, who's like the bonus player. Like if he's available, great. But if he's not available, we already have a defensive midfielder who's there. And if that defensive midfielder is also injured, we have Jorginho. So I think that's the way the club will look to do it. I think I think we would have learned from what we did this summer. So I think what cost us the title in the end was what happened in the first half of the season. So last season we had a very stable midfield. We had Xhaka, we had Thomas Partey, we had Odegaard. Overnight that midfield was just broken up, and Declan Rice has been very good, but we brought in Havertz and asked him to play in a position that he's not played in a while, and it didn't really work for a good part of that first half of the season, and we definitely lost some points because of that. So if you ask me, if we end up losing the title, what cost us, it would be that. So I think going forward, I think Arteta will do the rebuild in a bit more of a measured way. So keep the guys who have been there and done that because they are anyway not going to generate huge value, and then bring in talent in addition to that. So I do see Jorginho outlasting Partey at Arsenal, but I don't see Partey leaving actually in the summer. I think the club will aim to just keep all the players that are there together. But Sham, I also had another question to ask you. We were speaking about Saudi Arabia. I just had a question. So you spoke about on the flip side that Arsenal might go and maybe look at some of the options of players that are still there in that league. But I have a question. Do you view a player slightly differently if at a young age they chose to go to Saudi Arabia? Like, do you maybe question their motivation to play football a bit. Because for me, to some extent, that's the case. I cannot judge someone for wanting to go and do something because they're paid well. I cannot do that. However, take Gabri Veiga, for example. He was being pursued by a lot of top clubs in Europe, and now he's off to Saudi Arabia at the age of 21. Is he a player you would be open to signing at 23? Because I just sometimes wonder, like, if a player like this is motivated by money, maybe there could be a time in the future where maybe the head is not there, in the game, and it's somewhere else, especially at that age. Maybe I'm being too judgmental here, but just was curious to know how you see that.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate concern, you know, because you are, and I think I'd put Ruben Neves in that conversation as well, right? Ruben Neves was being courted by some of the biggest teams in Europe as well, and they decided to go to Saudi. It's tricky because I think there are situations where it might not just be the player, right? I think there are probably plenty of situations with that long list of guys who have gone to Saudi that some of those guys had agents in their ear basically
Mm,
saying, you should go, take the money, like it'll be great. And then, pocketing twice the commission that they would have if, they got sold to a team in Europe. I think that's part of it. And then I think on top of that, I think when you're a younger player, like your Gabri Vegas, and I think Otavio was pretty young when he went as well. Um, I think you see the money, and I think you get pitched on this idea of being a trailblazer, of having this legacy of starting the next great league in the world and taking football, out of Europe and making it a powerhouse somewhere else, right? I think all those things are things to consider. But yeah, I mean, if if you're a player who at the age of 20 got offered, a ridiculous paycheck and really nothing else, and you decided that was good enough for you to go to a place that, probably doesn't have the most established and reliable football infrastructure, that, might not be the most conducive to your lifestyle, that might, um, just kind of present some other problems for you, has, I don't want to say a history of shady business practice, but it's happened, right? You don't hear about English or French or German clubs, at least at the top level, not being able to pay their players, right? Or just refusing to, right? That's not a thing that comes up here. So I think if the big paycheck was enough to lure some players away who were entering their prime or who were about to make it big in Europe, I do think that's something to keep in mind. But um, at the end of the day, Arsenal have always, at least under Arteta, operated under that mentality of, if they don't want to be here, we don't want them. So, I think we'd be able to suss out which players are here for the right reasons and the wrong reasons if we were to, you know, make an approach or make an inquiry or something like that.
yeah, for sure, for sure. I think, yeah, like you mentioned, there's some interesting players out there. Like Otavio, for example, was obviously very highly rated, and he goes to that league. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens actually. So let's see. We'll know in the next few months if that trip was anything of note. But yeah, please go ahead regarding the Jorginho and Party situation. Sorry to deviate because that was on my mind, but yeah.
No, I think that's really all I had on that. But kind of to put a bow on the Saudi thing, it's either we went there to network and kind of build relationships for player sales and acquisitions, um, or we're trying to start another super league. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't really think that's what we're trying to do. But um,
Yeah.
so we have that happening, and then today, Gunner Blog reported for The Athletic that we will be open to listening to offers for Gabriel Jesus this summer, right? And I think that's really big news for it to be kind of allowed to be reported publicly like that, and kind of broadcast it to the world that we'd be willing to let go of Jesus, right? And we're talking about a player here who came in last season, and the first half of it, I think he was immense. He took our attack up to another level. He provided this guile and this trickery and this energy in opposing penalty boxes that made him really difficult to defend. Opened things up for Saka and Martinelli to really have excellent seasons last season. Combined well with the likes of Xhaka and Odegaard as well. Just all in all, was one of our best players the first half of last season. And then he went to the World Cup. He suffered that knee injury, was out for several months, and he just hasn't really been the same since he came back. Right, the goal rate isn't really there. That zip that he had, that little burst of pace over the first few yards, seems to have gone for the most part. Bounces off center backs a little more often than he used to. And he's even come out and said multiple times that he's basically playing through a high level of pain, right? And there's rumors regarding whether or not this summer. Well, actually, no. He said it himself. He said that this summer he might have to get an operation on his knee and maybe miss the Copa America in order to do that, right? In order to I don't want to say fix the knee issue, but have it in a better place than it has been. So, just kind of with all that in mind, do you think Jesus is a player that we should look to be letting go of, or is that a guy that you'd rather stay at the club?
So let's look at it logically, okay? Let's look at Arsenal's forwards. So at center forward, we have Kai Havertz, who's now outright the first choice center forward at the club. And the rumor is that, yeah, we want to bring in a center forward. Like, ideally, it would be good if Arsenal brought in a center forward, right? So that is on the radar. So we're going to have two center forwards. We're going to have on the left-hand side, we're going to have Martinelli and Trossard. On the right-hand side, we're going to have Saka, and there's talk of Ethan Nwaneri also being promoted next season, so he could play on the right. We have Fabio Vieira to play that. And I think Arsenal will also look to bring in a pacey winger if they can. So either a pacey winger or a center forward. So let's assume we bring in a pacey winger who can play on the right or left-hand side. Let's assume it's Rafinha or someone like this that we bring in. The fact is that while we would have excess of wingers, we also have Trossard who can also play down the middle if Havertz is injured. We also will have Martinelli who could give us an option if Havertz is injured. So we will have a lot of players playing that. And the truth is, Arsenal need to sell a few to balance the books, increase the budget even more. And if you look at sellable assets, I think Gabriel Jesus is the most sellable asset in all those players. Like, people will say, maybe we should sell Trossard. I, first of all, would be against that because he's the one player in our team that can actually finish and bury the chances and eat his dinner when he gets it. So I would not sell Trossard, but he also would not fetch such a high fee. But I think Gabriel Jesus has potential to fetch a high fee if the right club comes in for him, right? It need not be the Juventuses of this world. It could also be a team like, I don't know, a West Ham or an Aston Villa who might have sold some other player and got some money which they could put on a player like Gabriel Jesus. Look, I criticize Gabriel Jesus a lot, but that's because of the stage of project that we are in. I didn't have one word to say 2 seasons ago when our objective was top four and we were first in April of last year with 10 games to go. Champions League was guaranteed. I didn't have any bad words to say about Gabriel Jesus then because he's a player that changed our world, that elevated us immensely. Because if you compare him to Lacazette, he's way better than Lacazette was. And the fact of the matter is, Arsenal did not qualify for the Champions League several seasons before. He came in along with Zinchenko, who I also am critical of, but I do acknowledge the part that they played in getting us here. They did play some part in that. So, firstly, grateful for that. But this project has seen a lot of players who we once thought are going to be integral parts of the team. They were moved on, and Arteta actually turned out to be right in almost each and every single one of those decisions. And I do look at Gabriel Jesus, and I do think that, hey, this is a player. If we can get about 40 million for him, something close to what we paid for him, I would look to let him go. I actually put out this question a week ago that if we get an offer of 50 to 60 million for him, will you sell him? And most people said yes. And if the same question was asked at the start of last season, nobody would have been for it, right? And I do agree with what you said as well regarding his fitness. It's obviously not been the same. That level of sharpness is not that. But I think even if the level of sharpness is that, he has consistently been a player that has underperformed his XG for 6 seasons, for 7 seasons. He's never, I think, going to become a finisher who's like going to bury his dinner. And Arsenal, to go to the next level, we need ruthlessness. I think the only main benefit to keeping Gabriel Jesus is that he's really adaptable to play anywhere across the front line. So that's the only thing where I would be like, he could be an option on the right wing, for example, if Saka's injured. But all in all, if we get 40 million, I would definitely look to sell. Thank you very much, obviously, to him for all he's done. And yeah, we can move our separate ways. And we're going to bring in someone obviously to replace him. It's not like he's not going to be replaced. So I'm totally for that. I think we sometimes don't sell players on time. And I think this is something we have discussed as well. Like, for example, we had Maitland Niles those years ago where we should have sold him and Wolves came and we didn't. We kept, and the value got destroyed. And I think with Gabriel Jesus, I think his stock is still relatively quite intact. I think there will be a lot of teams in the Premier League that would look to sign a player like that. So yeah, let's keep our ears open. And it's not a surprise for me that Arsenal are doing this. But if he doesn't get sold, also it's not the end of the world. He can still be a decent squad option for us. So yeah, I just think it's about getting the right offer in. But Sham, how do you see it? What do you think is the right offer for a player like that? And I don't know if, let's say, a team like, I don't know, Chelsea or United come in for him, would you maybe increase that price a bit, or would you be like, yeah, you can keep him?
I mean, so Chelsea were interested in him at the time that we were trying to get him. I don't view Jesus as a player that I'm worried about on another team. Not at this time anyway. And I think any team that we sell him to wouldn't really handle him as well as we have, if that makes sense, right? Chelsea definitely, I just don't think would maximize him, right? I don't think they'd play to his strengths. United, maybe we'll see. I think United are quietly kind of improving behind the scenes and maybe becoming a side that we should keep an eye on again, right? In terms of whether they can threaten the top level of the Premier League. But I mean, if we got an offer for him at 50 million, I think you'd have to consider it, right? I think, obviously there's a lot of people who say, let's keep him as a backup, right? And I understand that sentiment, but you have to think about the financials associated with that. This is a guy that we signed for about 45 million from City, or it might have been just a little bit more. And he's, at the time he came in, he was the highest paid player in the team. I think he's sitting at about 265, 270,000 a week, right? So in a PSR landscape where Everton are getting docked points every other week, Forest are getting docked points, Chelsea I think are in for a hellish summer in that regard. I think you have to be very mindful of the resources that you are spending on players in relation to their role in the team. So if we have a guy who's riding the bench and he's going to be our backup striker and he's going to have like 15 starts a season or something, right? And on top of that, this is he's a player who maybe just doesn't ever go back to that physical peak that he was at when he signed for us. Is that really a good use of the money to be paying that guy 270,000 a week? Right? I don't. That's definitely not how
No.
Edu's going to see it. Right? Arteta might want to keep him, but Edu and Tim Lewis and Jason Ato and the Cronkies are probably going to see it a different way, right? And they're probably going to say we have to be extremely efficient with how we use our resources now, right? So, you're going to have to come up with a different player who can come in and play that role. And, you know, I do think there's still a faction of the Arsenal fan base that thinks Jesus can remain our starter over Havertz. You want to know something I found out today? Havertz is 6 goals away from equaling Jesus's goal tally in 2 seasons at Arsenal.
Yeah, that's not
So if
ideal. Of course, he's been injured also, which I think part of
True.
the problem, he's injured all the time.
Yeah. And I think really that is more so what it comes down to, even more than the salary for me, right? We have this talk about party every couple of months. We've talked about Zinchenko in this way as well. Tomiyasu's entering this territory, and I think Jesus is there now, right? I think he has been fairly available throughout the season, but I think we're clearly still managing his load, right? Um, and if he gets that knee operation and he's out for some time, and it takes him, at the very least, it takes him a little while to work back into full fitness at the beginning of the season, or worst case scenario, he misses some time at the beginning of the season. You just kind of have to ask yourself, is this something that's worth putting up with in terms of the reliability aspect? Or, should we keep a guy who, when he is available, there's a bigger chance than not that at some point during a game, he's just going to sit down because he felt something in his knee and we're going to have to take him off? Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I
and it's
think,
also sometimes his mentality, not mentality, but how he plays sometimes when the going gets tough. We saw against Villa at home, we saw Southampton last season. He's just so rushed sometimes, and I don't think he's ever going to get that out of his game, but he's just like a bit more composed and when he has to be. Doesn't snatch at shots, stops diving sometimes at the slightest of contact. So these are elements of his game that have always been there, and I don't know if they're just going to disappear overnight magically.
yeah. And, so I think, I don't say all that to say that we should just sell him immediately. Like, if we don't get a compelling offer this summer, and I would define a compelling offer as 50 million or more, right? If we don't get that kind of offer this summer, then hold on to him, right? Um, but if we do get something like that, I think you really have to consider it at this point, and you really have to think about how you could use that and reinvest in the squad and bring in a player who can contribute more. And to answer that comment that you put up there, I do still think he offers a little bit, right? We did just see him do this against Bayern Munich, where he sat down a couple players and put it on a plate for Leandro Trossard. He can still do it. The problem is he can't do it at the level that he was when he first arrived, and he can't do it as often, right? It used to be the case he could do it every week, and now it's the case where, you know, some games he'll just be bouncing off center backs, and the ball to feet play isn't working for him, and he's missing chances, and then he hurts his knee and he's out for 2 months. That's the situation we're looking at with him right now. So um, it's all about cost benefit. If no one is willing to pay the price that we want for him, keep him. If someone is, then I think there are enough concerns around him where it is worth it to take the money and run, and then go sign a Sesko, go sign a Xerxes, go sign someone else who can come in and
Mbappe.
contribute to this team. Did you say Mbappe?
Yeah.
I would take Mbappe, but
Potential.
that's probably our entire transfer budget.
I'm trying to look at players who can play left forward and center forward. And there's actually a guy who is sort of interesting to me, but at the same time, I'm like, Maybe not. And you must have seen the reports of Marcus Rashford come out uh, this week.
You, you know
What do you think
that's
about that?
I'm glad actually I'm glad you brought that up. I totally forgot about that. Rashford. So it's interesting, right? I I think I think we are moving away from kind of the Osimhen mold of striker, right? That we've kind of all been talking about for a while, and I think we are starting to look more at that left-sided forward who can play centrally because of Havertz, and I think also perhaps because of how Martinelli has not been able to play in a certain style that we want him to at times. To be clear, I think Martinelli has really been hurt by the Timber injury and by Vieira being absent. I think if you had both those players in, we would be using them with Martinelli and he would be having a better output and looking way better. But in these other situations where we're playing Havertz or Rice at left eight, um, it's not, and we're playing Zinchenko or Tomiyasu at left back. I don't think that works as well for Martinelli. It definitely doesn't work for him as well as it works for Trossard. So I think kind of with that in mind, because we are going to play that 11 at points next season. I think we are starting to look at a guy who can maybe play that role instead of Martinelli. And then when we do play Martinelli, that other signing can play at center forward. So Rashford's interesting because I think he is somewhat similar profile wise to like Isak and Liao, right? Guys like that.
I think Leah would be such a brilliant option. Honestly, I think he is the guy that we should go for. Like, throw the
Yeah.
budget at him. He pay even 100 million if you have to, because you don't find players like this with his pace, trickery. Like, I think he would be so perfect.
You do know who he was training with last summer? One Declan
Declan,
Rice.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
I think it was ahead of preseason.
yeah, yeah,
Declan
yeah.
Rice and Liao, and I think one other guy. Um, I want to say Bernardo Silva. We're all training together. So yeah, I thought it was interesting. I mean, maybe Agent Rice will figure in if we decide to go for Liao. But with Rashford, I think Rashford is interesting. Rashford is also like a cost benefit analysis, right? Um, because he strikes me as kind of similar to Martinelli, actually, where he's really pacey, can finish really well, but I don't think he necessarily is um, a big factor in build-up play, right? And I also have questions about his defensive capabilities, right? Because we do ask
Yeah,
our wingers to do a
pressing.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great, at least from what I've seen at United. Now maybe we are talking, because we've seen it before with Arteta, where he spots qualities in players that you don't really see them um, show off at their current clubs before they come to Arsenal, right? So there is, I think, a potential for that. But I guess to kind of just put it in one sentence, the way I feel about Rashford is if we go and sign him for 60 million and he's willing to cut his wages in half, then I
I
can
don't
live
think
with
he
it. Yeah. I for what it's worth, I think Rashford's going to be the Mbappe replacement at PSG. But, if we do sign him for something, I guess reasonable in quotation marks like that, I wouldn't hate it, but I just I don't know. I think he's
You
only
wouldn't love
there.
it either.
I wouldn't love it. I just think he's useful only in some very specific game states. Um, and if we are going to be playing deep blocks and just kind of hitting people on the counter, or if we are planning on playing over the top more often next season, then he'd be a real useful player to have. But yeah, I mean, I do think Rashford would be a bigger risk than Havertz, because Havertz at the very least had qualities and a versatility that made him interesting. Rashford, I don't know. I don't he has only a couple superpowers in my mind, and I just think that always makes a player a risky proposition. So Um,
Yeah.
I think we're at the point in the project where I'd rather just go get someone who's ready, right? And I think Rashford, after years of mismanagement at United and being in a culture that definitely is suboptimal and being under a coach who doesn't know what he's doing and being abused by the fan base to the point where he's come out and said things about it, I don't think he's necessarily um, in prime condition to come in and immediately help the team like we will need
Yeah.
him to.
Yeah, he's a bit of a hot and cold sort of player. Like last season, he was on a roll and he actually carried United to top four and also helped them win a cup. It's a really tough one because I feel like if he can get his act together and just work a bit harder off the ball, then I think you have a real player there on your hands. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Like I think he would probably be on my list, but not at the top of the list. I think Leao should be the guy that we should look to go for. And I think, yeah, I'm actually going to tweet it out after the podcast that he has to be our top target this summer for the front line. He has to be.
Yeah, if you're gonna go spend big money on someone, right? Then I would go try for Liao or Isak first, and then if those two don't work out, double back to Rashford. But I mean, I,
Yeah.
I definitely don't think we would sign Rashford if Arteta wasn't convinced he could do something off the ball.
I think we won't sign Rashford not because of how he is as a footballer, but because of his wages. I still think we might pay 60, 70 million for him, but what does he earn? I think he earns like what 400k or something ludicrous like that. So I don't see Arsenal breaking their entire wage bill just for him.
Yeah, I think it's like at least high 300s. It's a crazy number.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I don't think that's worth it. But all that being said, once because Arteta did want him, I think a couple seasons ago. And once you're on Arteta's list, you tend not to leave.
On
So
his radar.
yeah, so we'll see. He likes to go back in for guys. And another player that I think he might want to go back in for is Bruno Guimaraes over at Newcastle. And did you see this report from why am I forgetting his name? Sammy Mukbel. So Sammy Mukbel appeared on a podcast earlier today or yesterday and said that I think he mentioned the Gabriel Jesus thing that we were willing to listen to offers for him, but in addition to that, he also said that Bruno Guimaraes to Arsenal is something to keep an eye on. So um, I've had plenty of things to say about Bruno over the years. Um, but I wanna get your take first in terms of whether or not you'd welcome Bruno at Arsenal or whether you think this is something we should steer clear of.
I think there are some players that you will find annoying when you play against them, but when they're part of your team, you will like them even more. So I think he's one of those players. So some of the thuggery that he did against us uh, was super annoying, obviously. But the moment he does it to an opposition player, like in the North London derby, he ends up winding up Richarlison or someone like that. You start to like him. So I would like a player like that, and forgetting the antics that he does on the pitch. I think as a player, he's incredible. I'm still fuming with Edu that all those years ago, he came out of Heathrow Airport and we thought that he had gone to Brazil to sign Bruno Guimaraes. And who is next to him? It's Pablo Mari of all the guys. So I hope this time that we can finally get him because we've had two big chances to get him. Once when he was playing in the Brazilian league and then he went to Lyon. And even at Leon, like I thought the asking price was not that bad. Like we should have gone and put it out there, but we didn't do it. But what we also know is that if Granit Xhaka was leaving Arsenal in 2019 after that incident with the fans, that on top of Arsenal's list in that January window was Bruno G. He was the plan, but it didn't end up happening because Xhaka stayed. And you spoke about Arteta's list,
Mhm.
and I think this guy is also a guy who's always been there on his list. And there's two ways to view this. One way is to be extremely angry at the club and be like, why didn't you sign him when you had two opportunities to sign him for less than half the price of what he will cost today? That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is to say that, hey, wait a second, he's gone to Newcastle. He's got Premier League experience, 2 years of Premier League experience under his belt. He's played for the Brazilian national team. He's been part of a World Cup, and he's going to be part of the Brazilian national team for the foreseeable future. He's also picked up some leadership skills and he's settled into the Premier League. Maybe that's what we pay for now because he has all these experiences. He has a release clause of 100 million.
Mhm.
A few years ago, I would have been 100 million, no way. But if you see the way the game is going, thanks to Mr. Bolly and guys like this, 100 million is not that much actually for a guy who's incredible. Like, I think Bruno G is and has the potential to be one of the best in his position, no doubt about that. And when I look at a midfield three of Rice, Bruno G, Odegaard, that's a title winning midfield three, man. Like at the start of this season, like I just could not have imagined like Havertz, Rice, Odegaard being the formula to win it. But when I look at Bruno G, Rice, Odegaard, I'm like, no, this midfield three can win you the league. And let's also speak about what he can do to Martinelli, because Martinelli misses that player, a guy in build up who's good, can beat a press, play him into space. You know, I think where Martinelli is most effective is when he receives the ball in space. So yeah, but this is an interesting question. I think 100 million for Bruno G. Look, I'm not going to scrimp on 40 million to sign an inferior or a potentially inferior player. I think Zubimendi is a good player, but I think with Bruno G, we know exactly what we're going to get. And Sham was also speaking about this. That yeah, we need proven players now at this stage in our project. Zubimendi is really good, and I would welcome his addition. But since you asked me this or this, for me, the preference would be Bruno G. But Sham, what do you think? And also, I want to say one more thing. This is a very interesting one over here. Um, the release clause is payable in 5 years. It's not a release clause you just pay directly, which is interesting. So it's more like, yeah, you can get him for 100 million, but pay it in installments. It seems like a really interesting no-brainer deal. Like, I don't see this transfer failing at all. It's the
Mhm.
chance of Bruno G being a flop for me is like, unless he gets an injury or something like that, it's 0%. I think he's that good, honestly. Like, he's going to be phenomenal for us. And yeah, the shithousery as well in the team is going to be absolutely epic. So yeah, get him in, bring him in.
Yeah, so with the release clause thing, I think the upfront payment requirement, right? That requirement that when you pay a release clause, you have to pay it all at the same time at the beginning. I think that's only a La Liga thing. I think outside of that, it really is something that's typically negotiated between the teams, right? So it's not uncommon for release clauses to be paid in installments. But what's interesting about this is that right off the bat, Newcastle have agreed that they're going to take £20 million per year for Guimaraes over 5 years, right? Where, typically you'd have to negotiate with them, and maybe the best you're going to get is 33.3 million over 3 years, right? So it's already some crazy wiggle room that they've agreed to here, which makes things easier on the amortization front. But on top of that, with the whole 100 million for Bruno or 60 million for Zubimendi question, 100 million for Bruno all day, and here's why, right? I think people need to think about transfers in terms of the risk, right? So when I pay more for a player, I'm paying for less risk, right? So when you pay
Absolutely.
100 million for Bruno, you're paying 100 million for a guy who has Champions League experience. And I think with two different teams, right? Then he play in the Champions League with Lyon. Um,
I
I
think
could
he
be
was
mis.
also part of the team that knocked City out, if I'm not wrong.
Oh yeah, he might have been. Yeah. Um, but he has Champions League experience. He is very much a Premier League veteran at this point. Um, and he is an important player for his national team. He's let's see how old he is here. 26.
26.
Yeah.
I was just
He's
checking that. Yeah.
he's basically 26 and a half, right? Um, so he's entering prime age, and he's an immensely talented player, right? I mean, I'm looking at his FB ref here, 89th percentile for progressive passes, 97th percentile for passes into the penalty area, 98th percentile for through balls, 90 percentile for shot creating actions, 92nd percentile for shot creating actions from live ball passes. 98th percentile from goal creating actions from take-ons. Two more. 96th percentile from from take-ons attempted. 98th percentile for successful take-ons. So this is a guy, right, who can progress the ball really, really well, both through passing and through carrying, right, which makes him, which kind of shows why we're trying to get him when Xhaka was still around, because that Xhaka was a great progressive passer, not so much a progressive carrier. So you're going to have a guy who can come in and play left 8 and play Martinelli into those situations, but is also mobile enough on the ball that he can, basically, find ways to get Martinelli central and then play him in that way and combine with, Havertz or Odegaard or Rice or whoever's on that left side with him, and just that ball carrying is so important because it forces opposing players to make decisions defensively, which opens up the game for teammates. So I think all those things remove the layers of risk associated with the transfer. Whereas with Zubimendi, he's never played in the Premier League, right? So we don't know whether or not he can adapt to that style of play, the physicality around it. I know there's definitely been questions around that. I haven't had a chance to look at his stats, but if I checked, they're not as great all around as Guimarães'. I mean, if you look at Bruno G, it's just green bar, green bar, green bar, green bar, all the way down the page, right? So this is a guy who is a pretty high level all around midfielder. And with Zubimendi, you just don't know. You just don't know whether or not he'll come in and adapt to the Premier League. You don't know how he'll do in the Champions League, and yeah, that's kind of where that extra 40 million difference really is worth it to me. So, like you said, Sash, there are some guys who, when you play against them, you hate them, right? Because they do pretty aggressive things for their team, and I've said some things about Bruno after we played Newcastle, but I would prefer that on our team. The Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with so ALSTR says also the aggression he has is something the midfield lacks severely, with only Rice having it too. Yeah, it's that, but it's also just it's more of that aggressive behavior that, is in service of the team, right? This is a guy who's fighting for his teammates. It's not Richarlison who's trying to look
Yeah.
tough for people to like him, and then he runs away as soon as trouble actually finds him, right? This is a guy who, if he thinks his teammates are being bullied, if he thinks the team needs to stand up for itself, he'll do that. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's a personal thing or anything. So yeah, I think Bruno Guimaraes is pretty easily worth the 100 million. Like you said, Sash, I do think he can go on to be one of the top midfielders in his position. And that's a guy who I think really unlocks the left side of our midfield.
100%, 100%. Let's see if we get it done. I think the release clause is valid till the end of June. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised on June 29th if Arsenal do it, because that's what we did with Thomas Partey as well. Waited till the very end and then did it. So I think Arsenal will still try to negotiate for something lesser. But yeah, I think there are teams out there that will pay 100 million, which is 20 million over 5 seasons for him. So yeah, we have to get it wrapped up ASAP if we want to do it, I think.
Yep. I do. Sash said it himself. He said the two things you're best at are terminating contracts and paying release clauses. And right now we need you to pay release clause.
Yeah, he's
So
really good at that. He's so good at going to the headquarters of La Liga, Premier League, and telling them, "Here's the money."
oh man, yeah. We'll see. We'll see if it happens. I think he is probably one of the best options in the market this summer for that left A position that we're really trying to fix up and make more efficient for next season, because we are very much a right-sided build-up team at the moment, and I think that's something that we need to get better at in terms of our versatility and our ability to do things on both sides. So Sash, any other thoughts or topics from the last few days that you want to address?
No, nothing else from my end. I think it's just about now looking forward. Of course, transfer window talk is good. I think it helps us de-stress from this title race. So I think for us, yeah, the key now is to focus on Bournemouth, just continue to do as we're doing. Um, and yeah, we also have a question here. Any ideas on any defenders joining? Maybe a natural left back, Theo Hernandez. I really like that shout. I really like him as a player. In fact, in a group chat I was part of, I was like, I think he will suit us very well. But yeah, I agree with you. I think we need a left back, to be honest. So I don't know who that player is. There's obviously Hato from Ajax, who was previously linked. So yeah, interested to see if we could maybe sign a defender. But yeah, for now, I think the focus would be on getting Bruno G before June 30th. That should be, I think, Arsenal's primary focus. But before that, the primary focus should be to win this league title. All of this transfer talk has come in the middle. I think it's good that the club is doing that, because otherwise the stress would be too much, because we have not been this close to a league title in I don't know how many years. So yeah, it's going to be crazy next 3 weeks. And I hope by the end of it that we will all be happy.
Yep. I want to shed some more happy tears, Arsenal. Okay. So, just give me a reason to do that. With the left back, we'll probably talk about this at a later date, but there was that Graham Bailey report stating that we are looking to make a renewed attempt at signing Joel Heto this summer. So I think that's probably the guy that
Graham
we have in
Bailey is
mind.
like year 100, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. But I like Heto, so I'll take what I can get on the news front there. But yeah, I think that
Good
will
news
do it.
equal to tier 1.
Yeah, good news is always tier 1. So I think that'll do it for us today, and we're kind of just under the hour and a half mark. So we'll go ahead and get out of here, put a bow on this. But thank you so much for being here and joining us, and being part of the conversation as we talk about the Arsenal. As I said before, you can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale. You can follow Sash on Twitter at LT Arsenal. You can follow the podcast itself at This Week Arsenal on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, please do like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do leave a 5-star review. It really helps with getting the pod out there for people to see. And we hope to be back with you after a win against Bournemouth, hopefully one that really inflates the goal difference nicely, so we're not worried about that. But until then, be a gooner, not a goon, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.